Stefano, John will be resurrected by Rofl. Not when Valentines were forgotten, not when secret children appeared at weddings, not when dogged ex-lovers turned up at funerals. But after John Black's funeral, the one that had drawn every major family in town and even some who shouldn't have been there, the silence felt different. It was like a vacuum of hope, sucking the warmth out of every hearth. DaytimeConfidential.com. Melina Evans stayed home, her robe wrapped tight and tea growing cold by the window. She watched the snow fall in tentative flakes, Salem's answer to a calm, but it felt more like frost settling into her bones. It had only been weeks, but already the absence of John's laughter, that gravel-soft voice that always said that's a fact, felt like salt in her heart. The town mourned collectively, but privately many feared that Salem had lost more than a man. They feared it had lost light. And then, that light flickered. It started in odd little ways. Beau Brady found himself humming an old tune he hadn't played since high school, despite himself. Hope, believing it was just his heart easing into life again after nearly dying, smiled and brushed his hair back fondly. MichaelFairmantv.com. Over in Black Patch, John's old precinct-turned-detective office, Steve Johnson dusted off a box that had belonged to John. Photos, case files, cigarette lighters from 1980s Miami, memorabilia that felt like ghosts. His eyes fell on one item that wasn't familiar, a folded piece of parchment, stamped with something neither of them could immediately place. Melina left this behind, Kayla said quietly, having brought it over hours earlier. Said she didn't want anyone else to find it first. Steve unfolded the paper with the care of someone handling electric charge. On it were 3 symbols, an ankh, a phoenix, and something that looked like a laughing face drawn with swirling lines, the sigil of Rofl. What's a Rofl sigil? Steve asked. Kayla paled. You're kidding, right? That doesn't exist. But it did. In Salem's darkest corners, not the mafia back alleys, not the ISA safe houses, but far older tales, there were whispers about forgotten rites. Rofl, the reversion of fate's loop, an ancient legend rumored to have once brought back souls before their time. It was the sort of thing whispered by mystics and madmen, not police detectives. At the old Salem Library, where secrets came to die, Sean Douglas sifted through mythological texts. Old scripts bound in weathered leather, dusty tomes no one else cared to read. Because when your family legacy was supernatural resurrections, cursed jewels, and psychic seduction, little else seemed strange anymore. What if it's true? Sean murmured aloud to Kira, who was half skeptical and half terrified. What's true, that Salem's going to welcome back a man already given a proper funeral? She asked. Sean tapped the symbol. It says here the Rofl sigil is tied to cyclic rebirth, not just of the body, but of the soul's contract. It was used once, centuries ago, to bring someone back whose life was cut short before their destined cycle concluded. Kira leaned in. If this is about John, and I don't know why else it'd be, then why now? Sean swallowed. Because someone activated it. Melina knew Salem would think she had gone mad. But she didn't care. In the quiet hours before dawn, she brushed aside the layers of grief and focused on one thing. The ankh necklace John always wore. It was cold to the touch, inert, but to her, it felt like it still pulsed. That was when she saw the sigil in her dreams. Laughter. Not joyous. Not teasing. But an echo, a knowing laughter that crawled beneath her skin. Rofl is waiting, the dream whispered, coiling around her spirit like smoke. She woke, drenched in sweat, and whispered into the silent house. John, if there's any part of you out there, let me bring you home. Her reflection, blinking back at her from the window, didn't look sane. But neither did John Black's life. Storm clouds gathered over Salem that afternoon, sudden and unnatural. Lightning flickered without thunder. And every clock in town stopped at exactly 3:33 p.m., not just in homes but on the courthouse, the hospital, even on the big Salem Square clock tower. At that moment, somewhere in the woods near Brewster Cabin, a tremor rippled through the earth, small, subtle, like a heartbeat. Steve saw it first, on his phone alert, 911 calls spike, seismic disturbance detected. They're saying it's nothing, Steve muttered, though the hair on his arms stood up straight. I think something is coming, Kayla replied. What? Then every cell phone in Salem pinged with a single notification. A cycle begins anew. Rofl. Silence followed. And then, static. At University Hospital, Kayla had just finished charting and was about to go home. Her pager buzzed, an alert she didn't recognize, code R. Before she could react, the hospital lights flickered to a dim crimson. Down the hall, a door on the trauma floor burst open, slowly, deliberately. And there, in the doorway, a figure stood. Burned. Bandaged. Unrecognizable. But unmistakable. Melina arrived seconds later, breathless, running toward the shape. "John," she whispered. The figure's hand twitched. The bandaged fingers curled, not in pain but in greeting. And then, in that ragged whisper, barely audible over the pounding of her heart, came words that sent a shockwave through everything Melina had believed possible. "That's a fact." John was alive, but he wasn't fully here. He spoke in fragments. Phoenix, laughter. Not Stefano, not death. Rofl, cycle, unfinished. When Melina brushed back his bandages, just enough to see his eyes, she saw something she'd never thought she'd witness again. The spark. But it wasn't just life. It was Rofl's mark, the same laughing sigil glowing faintly on his chest beneath the bandages. He had been given back, but not without cost. The news spread faster than any wildfire. At the Brady pub, Hope wept and hugged Beau, who was wide-eyed and speechless. At Black Patch, Steve and Kayla argued about the how and why until their voices cracked. In the town square, people gathered, whispering, praying, staring. Some called it a miracle. Some called it abomination. Some just couldn't believe it. But everyone knew one thing. John Black was alive again. Only, was it John Black who came back, or was it something else wearing his face? Meanwhile, somewhere in the labyrinth beneath Salem, an ancient chamber long forgotten, the Rofl seal pulsed with life. Symbols like laughing spirals climbed up stone pillars. And then a voice, not John's. Deep. Resonant. Unseen. Let the cycle complete. The ground trembled. The chamber breathed. And distant, echoing laughter, both familiar and alien, curled into the air like smoke. For Salem's fate had been rewritten, and the pact had only just begun. John sat upright in a hospital bed that night, staring at the ceiling. Melina beside him, hand in hand. His eyes, clear, alive, betrayed something she could not quite put into words. "John," she whispered, "why are you here?" He closed his eyes briefly. "When I died, I heard something. Laughed. Called to me, like a promise I hadn't finished. Rofl, it said my story wasn't finished." She blinked back tears. "You're back, and that's all that matters." But deep beneath his ribs, where the Rofl mark glowed faintly beneath the skin, something stirred. And John Black, hero, detective, sage and legend of Salem, realized.